Every day I came home to tiny things being wrong. A chair pulled out an inch, a cabinet door left open, my shampoo turned the wrong way, nothing taken, nothing broken, just moved. In a locked apartment where I lived completely alone, someone was coming into my home while I was gone, and they weren't stealing, they were just spending time there. Welcome back. It's just you and me in the dark tonight. 3 true stories from people who live alone and came to understand slowly through 100 tiny wrong details that they weren't living alone at all. Let's begin. I love living alone. I want to say that first because people always assume that a story like this comes from someone nervous, someone who imagines things. I wasn't. I was the opposite. I found my apartment peaceful. It was my sanctuary, which is exactly why I noticed right away when small things started being wrong. The first thing was a kitchen chair. I came home and it was pulled out from the table, turned slightly facing the window. I always pushed my chairs in. It's a habit, a tidiness thing, but there it was, pulled out, turned. I figured I'd done it and forgotten. You always start there. You blame yourself. But then it kept happening, and it wasn't just the chair. A cabinet door standing open when I never leave them open. My bathroom things rearranged. The shampoo bottle turned so the label faced the wall, my toothbrush in the wrong slot. A book on my nightstand moved to the coffee table. My closet door, which I keep shut, standing open. Every day, 1 or 2 little things, out of place. Never anything missing, never anything damaged or stolen. Just disturbed. As if someone had been in my apartment, moving through it, handling my things, sitting in my chairs and putting most of it back. But not quite the way I'd left it. Not quite the way someone who actually lived there would. I changed my locks. I was sure that would end it. It didn't. The next day, my perfume was moved. I got a security chain, a door camera, the works, and the little wrongnesses kept coming. The camera never caught anyone at the door, which somehow made it worse, because it meant whoever it was wasn't using the door. My windows were painted shut, 2nd floor. There was no way in that I could find. And still, every single day, I'd come home, and something would be subtly, deliberately wrong. The thing that changed it from unsettling to terrifying was the day I found my own handwriting. I keep a grocery list on the fridge, and one day, at the bottom of my list, in handwriting that looked like mine but wasn't, someone had added an item. It said, milk, just milk, in a hand so close to my own I almost missed it. Someone had stood at my fridge, picked up my pen, and added to my grocery list in an imitation of my own handwriting, like they were practicing being me. Like they were settling in. I stopped sleeping there. I'd stay at friends' places, come back only in daylight, only to grab things. And the apartment kept changing even when I wasn't there to change it. Dishes I hadn't used clean in the rack, my bed made differently than I make it, the heat set to a temperature I never use. Someone was living in my apartment, not visiting, living. In the hours I was gone, they were making it their home, and slowly, item by item, making it match a version of a life that was almost mine, but wasn't. The worst part was what it did to my own mind. Because when the evidence is small enough, a chair, an open cabinet, a bottle turned around, you can never be completely sure. And so you start to doubt yourself constantly about everything. Did I leave that on? Did I move that? Am I remembering it wrong? I started photographing my apartment before I left every morning, every room, every surface, so I'd have proof, so I could compare, so I'd know I wasn't imagining it. And comparing those photos each night was how I confirmed it beyond any doubt. The chair really had moved, the book really had migrated, that cabinet really had been shut when I left and open when I got home. But it was also how I lost the last of my peace. Because once you have proof, undeniable in your own photographs, that someone is inside your home every day while you're gone, you can never again walk through your own front door without your heart in your throat, wondering if today is the day they don't bother to leave before you get back. I never found out who. I never found how they got in. The police found no forced entry, and eventually, gently, stopped taking my calls seriously. Because what is there to report? A moved chair, an open cabinet, a grocery list with one extra word. I broke my lease, and I left, and I took everything, and I scrubbed the place bare. But I think about the grocery list. Milk. Because a person who wanted to rob me would have robbed me. A person who wanted to hurt me had 100 nights alone in my home to do it. This person didn't want any of that. This person wanted my life, wanted to sit in my chairs and read my books and add to my grocery list in my own hand. And I've always wondered since whether they found somewhere new to do it. Whether right now someone is coming home to little wrong things and blaming themselves, and not yet understanding that somebody else has quietly decided to move into the shape of their life. That kind of visitor leaves you guessing at small objects. The next woman's guest was louder about it, greeting her every single evening through her own television, set to a volume she never touched. She lived alone, and she had a specific habit with her TV. She always kept the volume low, around 10 or 12, because she had thin walls and considerate neighbors. Always. It was automatic. And one day, she came home from work, unlocked her door, and her television was on, blaring, set to a volume in the 50s, filling the empty apartment with sound. She turned it off before work, she was sure of it, and even if she hadn't, she never ever said it that loud. She turned it off, checked the apartment, found nothing, and told herself she'd left it on somehow and maybe bumped the remote. But it happened again and again. She'd come home to a dark, locked, empty apartment, and the TV would be on, roaring, set to a volume she never used, sometimes on a channel she never watched. Once, on a channel her apartment didn't even get. A channel that wasn't in her package, playing on her screen at a volume that shook the walls, in a home she'd left locked and empty. She started to dread that moment of opening her door, the held breath, the turn of the key, and then silence, or that wall of sound. And on the days it was on, she'd stand in the doorway and picture it. Someone sitting in her apartment all day, watching her television, turned up loud the way you turn it up when you're comfortable, when you're alone, when it's your place and you can do what you want. And then hearing her key in the lock and getting up and going. Where? She never found anyone. But the TV had been warm once, when she pressed her hand to it. Not standby warm, on for hours warm. She'd tried, before that final night, to catch whoever it was. That's why she'd put the little camera in the living room in the first place. And she'd checked it obsessively, scrubbing through hours of empty room footage, and found nothing. That was the thing that had been slowly breaking her. The TV would be blaring when she got home, undeniably on, undeniably loud, and yet the camera pointed right at it would show the room empty all day, the screen dark, right up until a few minutes before she walked in, when it would simply be on, mid-program, no one having touched it. As if whoever watched it didn't register on the footage at all. As if the television turned itself on for an audience the camera couldn't see. And that, she realized, was exactly why the last night was so much worse than all the others. Because for weeks the camera had refused to show her anyone in that room. And then, that final night, it finally showed her someone live, standing in the doorway of her own footage. And the someone it chose to show her at last was her. The night it ended, she came home and the TV was on, and playing on the screen was her. Security camera footage from the little camera she'd installed in her own living room to catch whoever was doing this, playing back on her own television at that too loud volume. Footage of her empty living room. And as she stood there, frozen, watching her own empty room play on her own TV, the footage on the screen was live. It was showing the room she was standing in, and in the footage, in the doorway, there she was, tiny, on the screen, standing exactly where she stood. Someone had routed her own camera to her own TV and left it playing so that the first thing she'd see when she walked in was herself walking in, watched. She didn't sleep there again, and she never learned who'd been sitting in her living room all those days, watching her television at a comfortable volume in a home they'd somehow made their own. Some visitors announced themselves through a screen. The last story tonight needs no screen at all, just a single sensation, in the dark, that I promise will keep you on your own side of the bed. She lived alone and slept alone in a queen bed, always on the same side, the left side by the window. The right side of the bed was just the empty side. Cold sheets, undisturbed, the way it is when you sleep alone. She'd slept that way for years. One night she woke in the dark, the way you do, for no reason. And as she lay there drifting, she let her hand fall across to the other side of the bed, the empty side. And it wasn't cold. There was a dent in the mattress. A body-shaped depression pressed into the empty side of her bed, right beside her. And it was warm, like someone had been lying there. Warm, like someone had just gotten up. She went completely rigid. She told herself she was dreaming, that she'd rolled over in her sleep and warmed that side herself, that there was an explanation. But she knew the feel of her own bed. She knew that side was always cold, and now it held the warm, pressed shape of a body that was not hers, right next to where she slept, as if someone had been lying beside her in the dark and had risen the instant she woke. She didn't move for a long time. She lay there with her hand on that warm dent, afraid to turn on the light, afraid of what she'd see, or worse, what she wouldn't. She lay there and did the terrible arithmetic of it, the way you do when your body won't let you move. That side of the bed was always cold. She'd slept alone for years. She knew the temperature of her own empty sheets the way you know your own name. For that dent to be warm, really warm, body warm, something would have had to be lying in it for a long time, not minutes, hours. Every night, maybe for who knows how long, something had been lying down beside her after she fell asleep, and rising before she woke, and she had never once known, because it was always careful, always gone by morning, always leaving the sheets to go cold again before her alarm. She had slept beside it, unknowing, for longer than she could stand to think about. And the only reason she knew at all, the only reason any of them ever know, was that on this one particular night, for the first time, she had woken up a few minutes too soon and caught it still there. And after a while, she couldn't tell you how long, she felt the mattress shift. On that side, the slow, settling press of weight easing back down onto it. Someone lying back down, beside her, in her bed, and the warmth pressed closer. She was out of that bed and out of that apartment before she'd fully decided to move, out the door in her nightclothes, and she called someone from the street. When the police checked, the apartment was empty and locked. But the bed, they noted. One officer noted it, and she'll never forget the look on his face. The bed had two impressions in it, two body-shaped depressions side by side. Hers on the left by the window, and another on the right, on the empty side. On the side where for years she had been so sure that no one ever slept. She still doesn't know how long it had been lying down beside her in the dark, on the nights she slept alone and getting up before she woke. She only knows that one night she woke a little too early, and it wasn't finished yet. That's all for tonight. If this one's got you rethinking that empty side of the bed, then you know what to do. Subscribe and hit that bell, because there's a brand new true horror story here every single night, and you won't want to miss one. Give it a like so it finds the next person in the dark, and share it with anyone who lives alone. I'll be right here tomorrow night when the lights go down. Sleep well if you can.
Like, share, and subscribe for daily horror stories every single day.